Thank you. Okay, today we're going to start. We're going to start Daf Yomi Warriors. That's 12a. What is that gadget? Isn't that interesting? Whoa. Okay, so we're going to start from Metzia Daf, the Mishnah, the found objects of the sun. So it's a new Mishnah. We thank Hashem that we're able to learn Torah every day, and this chusar of the learning, which have the base of Migdash immediately. And we're learning in the memory of Sahaba Golda Bas Baruch Binyamin, and also a Refuah Shlema if anyone that needs Refuah Shlema. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. As a Hashem, we'll try to learn Thursday night. I'll let you know tomorrow and tomorrow afternoon. And that way we'll be able to catch up a little bit. Here it says, Metzia Daf. If a person has sons or daughters, son or daughter, that are minors, and they find an object, they find something on the street. More if he has a servant, a slave, servant woman or a slave, and non-Jewish, and they find something. Or let's say his wife finds something. It says he keeps them. It means it comes to the master, it comes to the father, it comes to the owner, or it comes to the husband. Let's say these are not minors, these are adult children, and they find something. Or these are Jewish slaves. Or it's his wife that he divorced already. Even though he has not paid the ksuba for this wife that he divorced, instead of belonging to him, like we had in the first case, this belongs to them. The Gemara is going to ask a question about the wife that he divorced. He's going to say, well, that's a little obvious. If he divorced her, why, what even is he thinking that he could do? Doing okay? Okay. Amar Shmuel. Shmuel comments on the Mishnah, which is very common for a first generation Amira, come in and to say something about the Mishnah. It usually starts off Rav or Shmuel, or in the name of Rav, in the name of Shmuel. Amar Shmuel. Shmuel says, what's the reason why a child that finds an object, it belongs to the father, it doesn't belong to the child? Shmuel explains, at the time that he found it, he immediately runs to his father. Look at what I found. The kid sung something. Look, mommy, I found a bumblebee. Something. Ooh, it stung me. That was one of the Jewish tapes had that on it. Anyway, right away they run to to show exactly what they got. So, which basically means what Shmuel's saying is that the child never even intended to take it for himself. Even when he lifted it up, he took it immediately. When we're talking about Magdiya Metzia L'Chavere, like can you lift an object up for someone else? Over here, it's not getting into that because here he was sort of like the hand of the father. That's the way it's being viewed here. Yeah.
How do they view the child as the hand of the father? Like in this case, but like if the father breaks a window,
the child breaks a window. Yeah, that's a good question. That's a good question.
So Shmuel's leaving open the possibility so far with Gemara that a child who's above bar mitzvah, we don't know yet, right?
Yeah, above bar mitzvah, there would be that he doesn't run right away to the father to show him. So he's taking it for himself. So, okay. The Gemara analyzes what Shmuel says. And it's going to be quite a long question. Well, it's going to take us down like 10 lines till we get to the bottom of this. Well, then we'll discuss the next part. The Memra, is this to say, the Savar Shmuel, that Shmuel holds, that a child cannot acquire anything on his own. If he's given something, fine. But if he finds something, if he's given something, that means it's gifted to him by a previous owner, is giving it to him. That he would be able to acquire. But it seems like over here that a child doesn't have any acquisition on his own. The only thing he could do is pick it up for his father, but he can't actually acquire on his own. But the problem is, Vahatanya, we have a brisa. It says, "Aseicher sapayel." Someone hires a worker to work in the field for him. Yilakit b'nei achrav. The worker's child is allowed to follow the father along in the field and collect the what falls. It's called leket. Leket is the one or two stalks that fall. That could be taken by a poor person. So the father's the worker. The child is walking behind, collecting what the father is dropping. Now, that's allowed. That's because the father is just a worker. However, let's say the father is not just a worker. The father is what's called an aris. He's a sharecropper. He takes a percentage of all the crops. But in order to get all the crops, so there's someone that owns the field, and the sharecropper works the field for a percentage of all the crops. If that's the case, then the child cannot collect after the father. The reason is because the father is a wealthy man. He's not a poor person. What we just did here is we just differentiated between a poor person and a wealthy person, but we're not talking about if the child is poor or wealthy on his own. The whole thing, if the child can collect, is totally dependent on if the father is wealthy or not wealthy. Which means that the child doesn't acquire anything on his own. Everything the child gets is for the father. The question is the father wealthy or not wealthy? That's the whole question over here. We're not different. We're dividing it like this: wealthy, not wealthy. We're not dividing it like this: father, child. Right? That's one column. That goes together. Father, child goes together. Rabbi Yossi says, Rabbi Yossi says it doesn't matter if the father's wealthy, if the father's the sharecropper or not. The child is not wealthy. The child is an independent person. V'amar Shmuel, and Shmuel says halacha Rabbi Yossi, that the halacha is like Rabbi Yossi, that the child is independent of the father. You hear the problem that's coming up now? Good morning. The problem is, if we would say that a child can acquire for himself, so when he collects, he's collecting for himself. And the father just takes it from him afterwards. But he took it for himself, he's poor. The child collects for himself. But if we say that a child can't collect for himself, everything he collects is just for his father, he can malakit love of malakit. When he collects, everything is for the father. The father is a wealthy man. How is the child or the wife allowed to collect? Question over here would be the child. It's going to be with the wife. The wife, everything she gets belongs to her husband. We said in this that the wife is allowed to collect. Rabbi Yossi says the wife is allowed to collect. Beginning of the brisa didn't mention the wife. Rabbi Yossi threw that in. Let's ignore the wife right now. Let's just discuss what the Gemara is discussing the child, and what we're seeing over here is if Shmuel holds like Rabbi Yossi, that means that the child is independent of the father. And the reason why the child is allowed to collect even if the father is wealthy is because he's independent. Back to our Mishnah, what we saw in our Mishnah is that if a child finds an item, it immediately belongs to the father. And Shmuel explained because he picks it up for the father. Maisha Shalom is here.
Start over. We're going to start over.
Okay.
The minor son and the wife is an extension of the father.
Yeah. That's what we're seeing from Rabbi Yossi, and Shmuel holds like Rabbi Yossi. The problem is from the Mishnah, we saw the opposite. So the Gemara answers this problem, this question. Shmuel time at the Tana Didon Kamar Balele Sphere. You need the what's it called?
Mine's hidden away. We're doing a bar mitzvah there?
What we just said was that Shmuel is not saying his own opinion when he was explaining the reason for the Mishnah. When he, yeah. Okay. Safe flight.
Safe flight.
No, I'm not taking over. Just not got on the plane.
Oh, okay. So Shmuel's just explaining the reason, but really Shmuel holds like Rabbi Yossi. That's how he paskins. Shmuel paskins like Rabbi Yossi, which means that the child is independent of the father. So why in the Mishnah did he say that the explanation is that the child picks everything up for the father? And the answer to that is that Shmuel doesn't hold like that. Mishnah was just explaining what the Mishnah holds. How does Shmuel not hold like the Mishnah? Because Rabbi Yossi is able to argue on the Mishnah, and he's passing like Rabbi Yossi, which is fine. Okay. Now the Gemara says v'savar Rabbi Yossi. Okay, so we've just established what Rabbi Yossi's opinion is. The Gemara says v'savar Rabbi Yossi katanis leizchiyim midiraisa. Are you saying that a child can acquire totally independent on his own? But we have a Mishnah that says if a deaf mute or an imbecile or a child finds an item, you're not allowed to take it away from them and say, "Yeah, you can't acquire. I'm going to just rip it out of their hand." You're not allowed to do that because for ways of peace. Rabbi Yossi says that you so much can't do this that if you do it, if you do take it away from them, you do take an item away from a child, it's considered stealing. You're robbing. Gezel Gomer, it's totally robbing. And Rav Chisda explains that it's only rabbinically robbing, which basically means that according to Rabbi Yossi and the way it's explained, according to Rav Chisda, that biblically he doesn't actually acquire it, the child. And we were saying before that the child is independent and he can acquire totally on his own. Here we're saying that after bar mitzvah is different, but we're talking about he's a child, he's a minor, saying that he can actually acquire, he cannot actually acquire. So, why did Rabbi Yossi argue and say Gesel Gomer can acquire for himself, right? Because he wants to say nafkamina leitzia b'dayanim. It's so much considered robbing that if someone takes it away from me, he can go to court and get it back. Okay. Question is, you told me before that Rabbi Yossi holds that a child acquires on his own, and the proof for that was Rabbi Yossi's opinion was that the child can collect after the father, even though the father's a wealthy man, the child is considered a poor man because he takes it independently for himself. Now you're telling me that Rabbi Yossi holds that a child does not really acquire on his own biblically. It's only this rabbinic institution that allows him to take that no one should be able to rip things out of his hand, but it's not a biblical acquisition.
I remember that this institution was for deaf mute. Now they're including the deranged person
and the child, right?
Operation.
We seem to oftentimes.
We have both. If you look back in that, when the Gemara gets in, I think it said also Chershet.
Like a few days ago, we mentioned about this.
Oh, there was something about a deaf mute, right?
As far as I remember, it was only the deaf mute.
What exactly did we say a few days ago about the deaf mute?
That they weren't allowed, that they don't. I guess by the Torah they didn't require, but then the rabbis instituted this enactment, so people wouldn't take advantage.
They pick it up together. We spoke about two deaf mutes pick it up together, right? But that's only because that was relevant over there. But in the Gemara Gittin that we're quoting, it said the Mishnah and Gittin had the whole thing.
Most of the time, the three are brought together.
Right. Okay. So Elamar Abaya adjusts what we just said, and he learns this totally different. He says Rabbi Yossi really holds that a child does not acquire on his own. If that's the case, then how did Rabbi Yossi allow the child to go after a wealthy father, his own wealthy father, and collect as if he's a poor man? If he's not taking on his own, he's taking for his father, then how could a wealthy person take what the poor are supposed to be getting? The Gemara answers like this. Elam Rabaya, Abaya says, Asu kmi shahalchu ba nemushes. Daniyam gufayim askid datayo. Let me just take a look in the next parak when it says this nemushes.
You say Rav Chisda?
Yeah, we mentioned this explanation there. Yeah, I was wondering if it would be Abaya that said this. It's not Abaya that says this. Okay. So what's happening is that there's at a certain point, if there's gifts that are being left for the poor or given to the poor, at a certain point the poor stop taking it. Is who's allowed to come and take it? So it says, well, at a certain point it becomes hefker and everyone can take it, even a wealthy person. Why? What are they supposed to do with it? Just throw it in the garbage? So if the poor don't want it, anyone can take it. So the poor have to say, okay, we're done taking. Now whoever wants goes. That what this usually happens with the mushy apples on the bottom of the thing, all the bruised apples. Okay, so
That's the nemushos.
that's the nemushes. The nemushes are the older people that they walk with a cane or something, and they take all the last everything that's left. They see everything, they take it. Once these people have come by and taken everything, so oh, you're thinking because it's mushy, the mushes? No, I think the Gemara over there said gave two interpretations of the mushes. I think, yeah, it was like a Rabbi Yechon or Rish Lakish. Yeah. Yeah, Rish Lakish says it's Likuti Basa Likuti, and Rabbi Yechon says it's Sabi Da'azli Atigra. It's the older people that walk with the cane, they find every last thing. So what we're saying now is that since it's being left for the public, so that's why the child is allowed to take it. Now, 1 second, why is it left for the public? So the Abai is explaining over here, Savri, Breda Haich Malaktilei. The poor people themselves think that since this person has a son that's going to be following him around, that the son is going to take it, whether it's correct or incorrect, that they think the son's going to take it, so they themselves don't even bother. They say, oh, there's going to be nothing left for us. So if they think that there's nothing left, then it's actually acceptable. So because they're giving up, why are they giving up? Because the son is collecting. Why is the son collecting? Because they're giving up. So that's why it's allowed to take it. Yeah. In other words, they're not collecting because they think the son is collecting, and therefore the son is allowed to collect, even though the father's wealthy, because they're just saying, whatever, there's nothing going to be there for us.
Like despair.
I'm sorry?
Like despair.
Oh, despair. Oh, I thought you were talking about like a spear, and I'm like, a spear tire. Okay. They give up. Amalei Rav Ada Bar Masna Labaya. Ada Bar Masna says to Abaya, what's going on over here? The son is there, and therefore the poor people don't come, and then therefore the son's allowed to take. Are you allowed to put a lion in your property to keep all the poor people away, that they shouldn't take what they're, and then they give up, and then you go ahead and take it? Elam Rava, rather Rava says, Asu sheina zeicha k'zeicha. We make someone that really shouldn't be allowed to take it, make him like he can take it. My timer. Aniyam gufayo nichalu keheched dechi agru ledetu nilkut penayo basrayo. Sounds like it's like a special institution. The poor people themselves are happy with this because if they ever get a job collecting, they would also like their sons harvesting. They would also like their sons to be able to go after them and collect the pieces that drop. And so therefore, this is something that's an institution for the for all the poor, that they should be allowed to do this. Yeah. You remember in Rousseau's writing, he wrote like how much every child benefits the family. More children, more income, and he had like a percentage of like how much, what's the value per child that they get for. Anyway, there was something about, I forget like how many times more have to feed the child, but he had like how much more income the child brings in based on what they're going to do in the field or something. So tax exemption deductions. Okay.
And today, the governments give you money for the kids.
Yeah, it doesn't work though with when you have to pay the tuition. So okay, right.
That's done as practice. They calculate how much consumer union, like an adult is one, and a 6 to 8 year old, and an 8 to 10 year old, and 10 to 12 year old, different percentages, so you can figure out.
So here they're saying that there's a benefit to having this child that that can collect afterwards, and actually the poor people are interested in this, that they want it to exist, so that if they get hired, that their child can also do it. A benefit. When Shmuel said that the child doesn't acquire, that's arguing on Reb Chia bar Abba. Reb Chia bar Abba is a famous student of Rabbi Yochanan. Reb Chia bar Abba, Rabbi Yochanan, Gemara Bracha says that Reb Chia bar Abba went over all of Rabbi Yochanan's teachings every 30 days. Rabbi Yochanan would correct him, so to make sure that he got it correct. It's very accurate. Reb Chia bar Abba says, in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Lei Gadol Gadol Mamish. When it says in the Mishnah that there's an adult child, it's not referring to an adult. But like Katan, it says that there's a minor. It's not Katan Mamish. It doesn't literally mean that he's a minor. Ela Gadol v'samach al shulchan aviv zeu Katan. Even if he's adult, but he's living at home, he's being supported by his father, so that's considered a child. Katan ve'ena samach al shulchan aviv. And if there's a child that's independent, that's supporting himself, zeu Gadol, that's considered an adult. So what would happen now, according to this, is if he's supported by the father, so we've instituted that everything that he finds belongs to the father. There shouldn't be any animosity there. That look, I'm supporting this kid. Now he's already an adult. He's already 18 years old. He's still living at home, and all his own income and everything he finds goes into his own bank account. But I pay all his bills, right? Right. Although it's very common.
But the other one, the kid, what? The other one though is the kid who's how old and he's on his own. It doesn't say the age.
Right. You're talking about the child, yeah.
It's the runaway kid or
the child that's supporting himself. Okay. If the Mishnah said that if there's a Jewish slave or Jewish slave woman, and there you have they find an item, they keep it. It's not a non-Jewish slave, it's a Jewish slave. So it's like a worker. The Gemara says, 1 second. Why is this even less than a worker? We learned it like 2 days ago. Tanya, Metzias Payal Atzmai. A worker would keep a found item that he finds, but that's only that's only he says, till with me today or weed the field with me. But if he says, I want you to do work with me today, then the owner of the household owner, the homeowner, right, the employer, keeps everything. So why by a Jewish slave do we say that the slave keeps it, and by the worker we say that the employer keeps it? Why is the slave less than the worker? Very, very good question. The Gemara and Yitzi asked this question. Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Barabba says, "Hacha be'eved nekiv margalias askinan shein rabbi reitzel l'shneisel l'malacha acheres." This slave, we're talking about that he strings pearls, and the master doesn't want him to pick up any items. Anything that he picks up is considered taking away time from his work. The master only wants him to do his work. So when he takes away time, he's actually going to have to pay his master for the time that he took to pick up the item. But because the master hired him specifically for what he's supposed to do, then when he finds these items, so that doesn't belong to the master, belongs to him.
Okay, so he loses a few minutes of work.
Right.
That, what do you think? He picks up gold.
Right. Because it's so rare for him to find something that would be worth it for him to pick up. But anyway.
He mentioned that his job is drilling holes in pearls, which is like a very like high-paying job.
Right.
So if he goes to find something, he's gonna miss out in producing.
Right.
This high-paying job.
And therefore,
He has to pay.
he'll pay you the master for the time off. But the point is that he'll be able to keep the item that he found, because the master hired him specifically to do this type of work.
He's still taking a loss.
It depends. It depends the value of the item that he finds.
From what it says here, like his job is very like high paying. So anything else that he'll do is like a waste of
Wasted time.
less,
So it's therefore it's rare for him to find something that would be worth it for him to pick up. But if he does find it and he picks it up, so then he can keep it. Yeah.
That corresponds to the guy who works by piecework. He gets paid by a certain number of clothes he sews.
Uh-huh.
If it's a lost object, he doesn't really care
Right.
about it. But it's a big one.
Right. 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 They would ask, is it worth it for Bill Gates to pick up $100 bill from the floor in the middle of his work? And then they have to calculate how much he makes, and every 10 seconds.
But
Okay.
they make that calculation all the time. There's a penny. I'm not going to pick up a penny.
Right.
$100 bill.
Rava says, Metzia malachta yaskinan. We're talking about that the master doesn't want him to take away from his work. But here he's able to pick it up while he's doing the work. So therefore since it's not taking away from the work, he's still able to do all his work. He's able to keep it. Papa says that when did we say that the worker has to give the everything he finds to the master, to his employer? That's only when he was hired to find that type of to find things. So what's he talking about? To hire a guy to walk around the street to find lost item. It says vehechidami. What would the case be? The akfei agma kavri. Talking about where the river overflows and it leaves all these things, the fish and maybe other items up on the seabed, so on the bank. So he was hired to go and collect things from there. Okay. Hi shifcha hechidami. We said over here that a Jewish maidservant can keep the items that she finds. The Gemara says, Ida Isi Shtei Saris, has she already reached maturity where she has the two pubic hairs? My boy Gabe, why she's still considered a maidservant? There's no such thing as a Jewish maidservant. Only a young Jewish girl could be a slave, but not when she's older. And if she still doesn't have the 2 hairs, if she still has a father, then Davua Havi. Why doesn't it belong to the father? We said before that anything that a child finds belongs to the father. Either less alav, and if she doesn't have a father, tepik misasav, then why doesn't she go free when the father dies? The Amar Reish Lakish says, Amar Vriyakanats misasav mir shasad and mikal v'chaymer. Reish Lakish held that if the father of the girl dies, then she goes free from the master. Now, and he has a kal v'chaymer for that. He says if signs of puberty take her out of her father's jurisdiction, if signs of puberty don't take her out of her father, but take her out of the master, so the father, the death of the father, which of course takes her out of her father's jurisdiction, for sure should take her out of the master. Okay. The Gemara says, "V'lavi taisa Reish Lakish," but wasn't Reish Lakish slugged up? How do you say slugged up? Slugged up. Disproven. Wasn't Reish Lakish disproven? Didn't we say that kal v'chaymer is no good? The Gemara's here quoting a Gemara Kedushin, which discusses that. It says Nema Mehan Nami Tevit Yufta. Let's say what the Gemara is asking is this should be another disproof to Reish Lakish. Because this Mishnah says that she can still be a slave girl even though her father's not alive. Basically, it doesn't say it clearly, but that's the only possibility. So this should be a second question on Reish Lakish. The Gemara says, like, this is not a question on Reish Lakish. How is she a slave girl if the father's not alive? The father's still alive. So my Haran Shalahan. So what does it mean it belongs to the girl? It says Lafuki Derabba. It's coming to exclude, not that it belongs to the girl, it's coming to say that it doesn't belong to the master, it belongs to the father. When it says it belongs to them, it didn't mean her independently, it meant her father belongs to. Why did it say them? Because it doesn't belong to the master. If his wife finds a lost object, so we said that if he's married to her, then it would belong to the husband. But if he divorces her, then it belongs to her. Gemara says Girsha, if he divorced her, Pshita, of course it belongs to her. But what attachment is there that they're divorced and she's still going to find items that are going to belong to him? That shouldn't work like that. So what are we talking about here? The Megureshas, Veina Megureshas. She's a suffix, in doubt if she's divorced. How's there a doubt if she's divorced? Because he threw a get to her and it landed in those days. If it landed in closer to her, then she's divorced. If it landed closer to him, then she's not divorced. He made the get probably into a paper airplane and he threw it, and it depends where it lands. So this plane went, we're not sure exactly where if it landed closer to him. So it's a suffix. Oh, it's suffix. So maybe.
Good question. Sometime in the last year, you told us a Misa that occurred. It was a shliach that was asked to drive out somewhere in the boondocks and deliver a get to a woman who had gone off the grid.
Uh-huh.
And I think you said in handing it to her, he dropped it accidentally, and she reached down and picked it up. And on the way back, he thought, oh, is this a problem? He had to go back and do it.
Right.
Why was that a problem?
Because it says that it has to be given to her, v'nasan biyada. And if you say Taliyasa me'al gabi karka, if you say lift it up off the ground, I forget what daf it is in Gittin, maybe daf Yud or something. Yitzi says Yud Aleph. So it says if you lift it off the ground, then if you tell her to lift it off the ground, it's not counted. It has to actually be given from the husband to her. So shliach could also give it.
So that overrides the idea of the Dalit Amos or the Katzah.
Okay. Yeah, so it's because nowadays we don't use all of those. Yeah, no, we give it into her hand. We don't use the courtyard and the mailbox. We don't use a drone. It has to be handed. Well, you can make a shluchim. That we still do. We usually don't make a shliach like Kabbalah, but we make a shliach lahilacha. The man makes a shliach to bring it. Yeah. Yeah. So, Amar Rab Zera says. So we're talking about here. It's a doubt if she's divorced. In those times it was possible. You throw it to her, and depending on who it's closer to, that's how they would do the get. So there was a doubt. Amar Rab Zera, Amar Shmuel. Rab Zera says the name of Shmuel. The sages said that if it's a doubt, any case that's a doubt, the husband still has to pay for her food. So why did they say that if she's married, it belongs to her husband? Because he shouldn't have animosity towards her. But over here, there already is animosity. He divorced her, just didn't reach her. So we're not worried about them fighting because he already divorced her. The only thing is, we're not sure if the divorce was effective, but we're not trying to create love between them because he already threw the get at her. Okay. Matzah Shtari Chayiv. In other words, what the Gemara just did was made a chiddush that even though she's divorced, we say that when she's divorced, she keeps the objects. So of course she's divorced, she keeps it. Says no, there's a case where she's in doubt if she's divorced, and the husband really has to support her, but nevertheless she still keeps the objects. That was like the chiddush. Matzah Shtari Chayiv. Now we enter into a new topic here. We've been talking about finding items and different things and arguing over it, but now we get into a discussion of documents, and it has to do it has to do with finding documents, but that's not going to be the main topic here. The main topic is going to be how documents work. And the way we got into this was if you find a document, then but that's just an opening to just discuss documents. It takes a bunch of pages over here all about documents. It's called shtaris. The next few pages all called shtaris. Matzah Shtari Chayiv. You find documents of debt, of promissory notes. If it says in it that there's liens on properties, yeah, Ruvain lends money to Shimon, and there's a lien on Shimon's property. So if that's the case, lo yachzer, you should not return it to Ruvain, because what's going to happen is he's going to go and collect not only from Shimon, but from all the people that Shimon sold the properties to, and extract the properties. Bezdin from him, because the Bezdin will actually go to the new purchasers of those properties and extract them. But if there's no lien on properties, then you can return them. Shein Bezdin from him, because Bezdin won't collect from them. That's Rav Meir's opinion. Chacham say you can never return it. If they should Bezdin from him, because Bezdin will collect from them. We'll see what's going on over here. But my yaskinon. There's some basic questions over here. What is the case that the Gemara needs to analyze? How is this working? What's the case? This is the basic question. When we come over to Shimon and we say, we found these documents that you owe Ruvain money, so what does Shimon say? Does he say, yes, I owe him the money? Or does he say, no, I don't owe him the money? That's going to be the whole difference. What's going on? If Shimon agrees that he owes him the money, so give the documents back to Ruvain. Shimon says he owes him. What's the problem? He says, he agrees that he owes the money. And if, let's say, Shimon says he's a scoundrel, I don't owe him that money, this is all a fake. So why should we return the why should we return the item, the documents to Ruvain? Shimon doesn't agree. Okay, I understand you're not going to go over to all the purchasers of Shimon's property, but you're still going to take it from Shimon, and Shimon doesn't agree to these documents. He says that maybe they've been paid or they're forgeries or whatever. So the Gemara answers, really we're talking about where Shimon agrees that he owes the money. What's the reason why we're not returning them to Ruvain? Shimon agrees. The Cheshinan, we suspect, maybe Shimon wanted to get these documents written because he knows that he's going to need the money and he's going to approach Ruvain. So he has them written in Nisan, the month of Nisan. And then by the time he gets the courage to go to Ruvain to ask him for the money, it's already Tishrei. So now in the document, it says that there's a lien on the properties of Shimon. The money that he actually borrowed wasn't until later. What's going to happen is, because the documents have a date in it, Nisan of the previous year, so then when Ruvain comes to collect the money, he's actually going to be collecting properties, taking properties from people that have purchased the properties in between Nisan and Tishrei, even before he has lent the money. He only lent the money in Tishrei. And Shimon has sold properties already that Reuben is going to have the rights to collect. That he's going to, it's going to appear that he has the rights to collect because the document says Nisan. So we don't want to return those documents, even though Shimon agrees that he owes the money, because the date in the document is wrong. Mar says, Yachi, if that's the case, why are you only concerned about this document that we found? There's a problem with every document. You should be concerned about this. That maybe the document was what's it called, predated document, and you're gonna be extracting money from purchasers that didn't even know that there was a title issue on the property because the money was never lent. It says kol stari loy rei, hani rei. We don't suspect this by every document. We only suspect this by documents that have some sort of problem with them. For example, this document, the fact that it fell on the floor and someone found it, it's already like, what's wrong with this document? Why are you not taking care of it so well? Is it not really accurate? Is something not accurate? Why do you drop it? You dropped it. The reason why I dropped it is because there was a problem with it. That's why I wasn't taking care of it so well. Maybe he dropped it because he didn't borrow the money yet, or maybe he dropped it because he knew that there was something that was inaccurate. So that's why we're concerned about this more by a document that's dropped than by a regular document. But 1 second, you have a Mishnah. It says that you're allowed to write a document, a cipher, a scribe can write the document for a borrower, even though the lender's not there. Question is, why are you ever allowed to write the document like this if the lender is not here to confirm that the money is being given right now? Why are you allowed to write the document for the borrower and he's going to go and take it to the lender and say, will you lend me money? I have the document written already. Why are you allowed to do that? Going to end up happening that he's going to the borrower, the lender is going to take the properties from the purchasers, and it's going to be predated. Amar Ravasi says, "B'shtari akna." We're talking about where Shimon is actually putting a lien on his property even before he actually borrows the money. So therefore, when he goes to collect it, when Reuben collects it, it's correct. The lien was there without the money being lent. It's like the property is mortgaged, but the money didn't go through yet. That would never happen, right? It's only a lien on the property when the money is there. But here he's saying that somehow he puts a. You see, that's why like a ksuba. Someone asked me recently about a ksuba. Can you write a ksuba like several days before the wedding? Why would you want to do that? He says, well, he wanted someone that's a witness. He wanted him to be a witness, but it's not going to be around. So the husband can obligate himself from a previous day that everything that he owns should be indebted. It should have a lien on it. He can do that. It's a little odd, but he's allowed to do that. Yeah, they didn't end up doing that.
Yeah,
okay.
Doesn't this only work if there are witnesses on the piece of paper?
Yeah, we're talking about that. There's witnesses.
So now there are witnesses that are signing to something they didn't see occur.
Well, I guess what they're seeing is that this person agrees that he owes that.
Okay, so I get it. So it works against his interest. So no one's going to do. People are going to go around doing this, but don't the witnesses have to be aware of the actual loan? You're saying they just need to be aware that this person's indebting himself.
Yeah, I don't know.
Thank you. I'll see you later.
Safe travels.
Safe travels,
Thank you.
That's a good question. It's a good question. I have to look it up in the commentaries. I bet like the notes on the art scroll or something would probably comment on that. Yeah, let me see what it says. Hmm. Let me check it up later. There's a lot of notes here. Okay, I'm on a different page. Okay. The Shibin Nafshe, that he indebted himself. I might be on the next page. What do you see there? We'll check it up later. If that's the case, then our Mishnah that says we said that you should not return the document if there's liens on property. And we said that it's talking about when Shimon agreed. What are we concerned about? Why should he not return it? Because maybe he didn't lend the money until Tishrei, but he already wrote the document earlier, and he's going to end up confiscating. Reuben's going to confiscate properties from Shimon's purchasers, and the money wasn't even lent yet. He says, so what's the problem? Next, let's take a look. Is it talking about this type of special document where he already indebted himself? He already made himself that he owes it already from an earlier date. Then what's the problem? And if it's a document that's not a shtar akna, that he's not indebting himself, then take a look at this. There's nothing to be concerned about. The only time where you would ever write a document like that is if it's a shtar akna. Shtar akna means when he indebts himself from an earlier date. And if he's not indebting himself from an earlier date, then he can't even write the document. So the only way that this document could have ever been written was if it's a shtar akna. It's a shtar akna, then he could already give it back because he already indebted himself all his properties to this debt, even though he didn't borrow the money yet. And if he didn't indebt himself, then they never would have written the document. So what are we concerned about? Amarle Ravasi says, Afagav the story, the lavakna, even though it's not a shtar akna, and kileka melva bade like a svinan, and really it should not be written unless the lender is there at the time, right? That's the way we set it up. But masnis in our Mishnah, it's given the nafal. Once it fell, so Israel, there's already it's called a reyesa. There's already a problem here. We think maybe this was just a freak, not an accident, but this was like, usually we don't do this, but we'll make an exception, and they wrote the document anyway. Why would we think that? Because this document was the document that already has another problem because he dropped it. So we'll say that it has another problem, that it was written before the money was actually lent, even though it's not a shtar akna. Abaya says Abaya says he doesn't see any problem over here at all. He says once the witnesses sign on the document, there's a lien on the property, even if the money isn't lent. Even if it wasn't a shtar akna, even if he doesn't say clearly that, it's already automatically, there's a lien on the property. Mishum de Kashli, because Abai had a question. He says, I don't believe that if the document is not supposed to be written, I don't believe that it would ever be written. So it must be that why was the document written? It must be because he actually indebts himself. Even if it's not officially indebting himself, it doesn't matter. Once the witness is signed, it's considered like he indebts himself. Gemara says, but we learned in the Mishnah, someone finds divorce documents or deeds of manumission, like the freeing slaves. Daitaki is a will. Sick bed wills. And gift documents.
For me, that includes a cold.
And shavrim are receipts that debts have been paid up. Someone finds these documents. You should not return them. Maybe they were written, and then the person decided not to use them. Just because they're written doesn't mean that this was already done. Maybe he had the get written for his wife because he was upset with her. But then she made the lemon and meringue pie, and right. And they said, "Oh, it's all everything is. Oh, it's right."
Oh, forgive us.
So
The witnesses though on that, was it a rough draft or was it a?
with witnesses, but it's still not effective until he gives it.
Right.
So what's the problem? If he changed his mind according to Abaya, my havi, what's the problem? Because Abaya says that once the witnesses sign, so it's already effective. Now the get would not be the issue, because the get would only be effective once he gives it to her. But the other documents, what's the problem? As the Gemara says, that would only be that if it reaches his hands, then we can say that the time of the signing of the witnesses is when it's effective. But if it never reaches his hands, then we don't say it's anything. Yeah. Rashi has a question over here, that we have a Mishnah that says that any predated documents are puzzle. How does any predated promissory notes are puzzle? It's not a valid document. How would a buyer explain this if once the witnesses sign on it, it's already valid? So Rashi answers, predated doesn't mean, when the Mishnah says predated documents are puzzle, that doesn't mean that it's predated before the loan. That means that when the witnesses sign on it, they wrote February when it's really in March. That's puzzle. But if they wrote March, whatever day, what's today, 11th, 12th, they wrote the day, the 12th, 13th. Today's 13th. If they wrote the today's date, so then that's going to be kosher according to Abaya, even though the money wasn't lent yet. It's only predated means that you actually put on a different date. That's okay. Elamas nisin dektani, but our Mishnah that says if someone finds these documents of debt, we have established that it's talking about when Shimon agrees that he owes the money. You shouldn't return it because maybe the documents were written in Nisan half a year before the money was actually lent. According to Ravasi, what's the reason why you don't return it? Because how could documents be written? He says, he says the documents could be written if it would have been those real documents where the person indebts himself. And the reason why the Mishnah you don't return it was because we're concerned that those documents were started the lava knaisa. And Kudamina, the way we explained that, maybe he wrote it. But according to Abaya, once there's witnesses on the document, it's automatically a valid document. So why should you not return it? How is Abaya going to explain the Mishnah? Abaya says, Mastisna at the time of the Chayish Lepiron or Leknunya. Our Mishnah, the explanation for our Mishnah is because we're concerned that these documents were paid up, and they're doing a trick on the purchaser. Shimon has sold properties to, let's say, Zevulun. And Ruvain and Shimon were friends. Ruvain had lent Shimon money already. And Shimon had already paid the money back. And then he says, you know what? I want to get that property back. Let's do this. You use the document to come collect the money again. I'm going to say I don't have money. And you'll take the property away from Zevulun that bought the property. So that's a trick that they're doing. According to Shmuel, that says that we're never concerned about this, that it was already paid up and they're doing this trick. So what's our concern? Why we're not returning the documents to Ruvain? Maybe we can say, according to Shmuel, that he learns like Ravasi, that says that a document could be predated only if it would be Shtari Akna. And he'll learn our Mishnah, that our Mishnah somehow the document got written even though it wasn't a Shtar Akna, which means that he indebts himself. But if he holds like Abaya, that says that once the witnesses sign on it, automatically the property is indebted to Ruvain. And Shmuel also doesn't hold that we're concerned about doing that trick. So what's the concern according to Shmuel? Why don't we return the documents? Gemara says Shmuel will learn our Mishnah where the Shimon is claiming that he never borrowed the money or he paid the money back. He doesn't agree. 1 second. If that's the case, then you have another problem, a major problem with the Mishnah. That's why we didn't want to say this. We were trying to learn the Mishnah where Shimon agrees that he owes Reuven money. But now you're telling me, according to Shmuel, that doesn't have any of these concerns, according to Abaya, that there's no issue, so then automatically the documents should be returned to Reuven. So now you're telling me, but Shimon disagrees with the whole loan. So 1 second, if there's no liens in the property, why do you just give it to Reuven? And although the Legavim and Mishabdi, that he can't take it away from people that purchased the property, but from Shimon himself, he's going to be able to collect. The Gemara says Shmuel follows his own reason. The document is totally invalid. If it has a lien in the property, then it's a valid document. Then you can't return it because Shimon says that that he never borrowed the money. But if there's no lien in the property, then the document is invalid automatically. So that's why we're allowed to we return it. It says, but if it's invalid, so why do you return it for? Because we just give it to him that he can use as a bottle stopper. For the lender can use it as a bottle. Why don't we return it to the loiva, to the borrower? Why are we returning it to the lender to use as a bottle stopper? Maybe the borrower needs a bottle stopper. It says loiva damar, we don't return it to the loiva because he says, he says, I never borrowed. This whole thing is a forgery. So why are we giving it to him? We can't give it to him. He doesn't agree to the whole thing. Who would it be? It would be Reuven's that made up the story. Okay, let's leave it over here.
Oh, it's 7:01. Started.